Hello and a very warm welcome from ET Studios, ETHRWorld and Coursera. I'm Devina Lason and today we're here to deep dive into the fascinating topic of the future of learning and work, creating more equal opportunity in a more digital world. Now, through this insightful conversation, we will explore the role of technology and learning, of skill development and employability, overcoming language barriers, the path to maximizing impact, and much more. To discuss this and understand the future of learning and work, we have with us today an esteemed panel of experts. A very warm welcome to Aadesh Goyal, Global CHRO, Tata Communications, Lakshmanan M, CHRO, L&T Technology Services, and Raghav Gupta, MD, India Asia Pacific, Coursera. Gentlemen, welcome. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today on ET Studios. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Devina.
Absolutely. Happy to be here in Delhi.
Yeah, and looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. We're here to talk about a really fascinating topic, which is the future of work and education and how the two can really marry together. So, Raghav, maybe we can start with you. In your experience, from your vantage point, how would you say companies can really look at the process of upskilling employees, giving really mission critical skill sets to people while still keeping in mind the overall value of the organization and having a smooth and integrated learning process?
It's not new, Devina. Companies have been investing in skilling of their employees for many years, but especially since COVID, right? We saw technology become so important to companies. I'm sure both CHROs will tell us technology is the business.
Yes.
It is not a side department anymore. We also digitalization becoming extremely important. And I would say over the last 1 year or so, AI, generative AI has become very important. There was to an extent a time when technology was relevant for technology people. But generative AI is a general purpose technology, right? All of us in our personal work life should be using it. And that's becoming mission critical as well. And we'll talk about that as we progress the conversation.
Absolutely. That's great. Gentlemen, let's get you in on this. Aadesh, how about you? I mean, how do you see, as we've been discussing, the role of Gen AI enhancing every aspect of the value chain when it comes to learning in organizations?
See, I think there are two parts to Gen AI. One is how do you leverage Gen AI to do your day-to-day stuff. So like everybody else, we have started to do experimentation with, for example, look at the process of software coding. And initially we saw it led to 12-13% productivity, but we have now reached 25% productivity levels, right? And as we become better at it, it might reach 50%. So what it is doing is that a lot of time that was spent in kind of vanilla type of software work, that time can now be spent on more specialized, more value-added work, right? Similarly, when you do tech support, a lot of level 1, level 2 problems are pretty easy to solve, and they, by leveraging Gen AI core, but really trained with your own data, you can actually solve majority of the L1, L2 problems themselves. So that's really the one part. I think the second part is how do you leverage AI to provide intelligent options to the employees so they can really train on the right things that are relevant for them based on their current job, future aspirations, and where the company is heading.
Absolutely. Can you share some examples perhaps of how this has worked well in your organization?
So one of the things that we have recently implemented, last year is called Talent Central. Now what it does is for every employee, you get an option to how do you want to build your career next. Much like when you go to a location, it says what are the local attractions, right? So what is the local attraction for every employee based on where they are today? What could they do to move vertically? What could they do to move into a role horizontally or diagonally? And for each of these, there are multiple roles that automatically match. And when you double click on it, it shows skill gaps. And when you double click on the skill gaps, it shows which are the learning programs that you could do or projects that you could do to bridge those gaps. So every employee has a power in their hand now to figure out what is the role that they want to build and the pace at which they want to build, and really they can begin now, right? And at their pace, they don't really have to ask anyone.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Really exciting times, Lax. Let's get you in on this as well. In your experience, what are some of the real innovations when it comes to learning in the workplace that are working well?
Sure. I think, a lot of transformative work has happened in India today. And I'm particularly impressed with what our government of India is doing in the online learning space, and the amount of people they are covering using technology, right? The PM E-Vidya program, the Swayam Prabha program, the Nipun Bharat program. I mean, these are all amazing programs that touches millions of people in this country, right? And taking on from there, a lot of private content providers, platform providers have started creating a lot of content. And the way we learn today has very dramatically changed, right? Very, very dramatically changed. And, the amount of coverage that we are able to do in terms of number of people using that content has increased phenomenal thanks to COVID to a great extent. And a lot of private players, including my own group company called L&T EduTech. I think we created that, launched that about 2.5 years ago for students, for corporate professionals, to help students skill, train, upgrade their capability to become industry ready, and to make corporate employees also go onto the platform and upgrade their skills for future requirements. So there's tremendous amount of work that's happening in that space in India.
Absolutely. So, speaking of the skill gaps that it really takes to fill these days for employees to be ready for different roles, different organizations, Raghav, what are some of the biggest areas that you see the skills needing to fulfill? And for example, how do you cross certain barriers, like language barrier being one, cultural differences, communal requirements? How do you see these gaps being filled?
So at a broad level, right, because I have the benefit of data, sizable data, globally there are about 130 million people who come to Coursera. In India, there are about 25 million people who come to Coursera, and there are about 4,000 companies. There's lots of content that's available on Coursera. It's in 11 domains. 80% of the consumption of that content is in 3 domains. It's technology, it's data science, and it is human skills. So very broadly, it's safe to say that for most working professionals, for most organizations, these are the areas where a lot of skilling is happening. Within technology, we spoke a little bit about AI and generative AI. And Aadesh spoke about software developers and tech support, right? And you might remember at the G20 last year, many CEOs from India and outside spoke about the unlocks that Gen AI will cause. And there are 5-6 job roles where Gen AI is expected to have the biggest impact. Software engineering, customer service, tech support is a part of that. Sales, marketing, supply chain, product development, right? So these are areas where there is a lot of momentum on all of us needing to reskill. Gen AI is almost like many of us learned Excel or PowerPoint, whenever we learned it. It's a fundamental technology. And in all of this, what we are doing is, look, in a country like India, while you can start with English as the language of instruction, it will only get you so far, because to reach people who don't necessarily are proficient in English, you need to be able to then take content to them in the vernacular languages, right? And Lak spoke about what the government of India has also done with Bhashini and other language translation tools. Now we have great content, but a lot of it is in English. Till recently, it used to cost almost about 8 lakh rupees to translate one course from English into another language. And it used to take 3 months. Today, it costs about 20,000 rupees and it takes 24 hours. So, one day after the International Hindi Day, which was in January, we announced 4,000 courses translated into Hindi, with the intent being, look, let's extend this learning opportunity to many more people. And the intent is to then take it to many more languages for the country as well.
Absolutely. Aadesh, same for you at Tata Communications. How are you transcending the communication barrier, the language barrier, when it comes to addressing your very diverse workforce across the country?
Yeah, so actually we don't much have a barrier for language, because while people come from 50 nationalities and in a country like India, 20 languages, but most of the work actually happens in English. So that barrier, in a way, it doesn't exist. But the barrier that exists for us is slightly different. So, for example, we have about 14,000 employees in 33 countries. We have 752 unique roles. Now, and people are continuously coming and going, right? Even 10% attrition means you're going to lose 1,300 people. And if you're growing, you might be adding 2,000 employees a year, right? Now, how do you bring the same value of learning for people depending on wherever they are? So on-demand learning platform, something like LearnFlix, inspired by Netflix, where people can learn anything, anytime, whenever they want at their own pace, in bits and bytes, or a certificate that may last 6 months. So this has really helped people to get power in their hands, and intelligently they keep getting alerts every day on what they could learn, right, based on what's relevant for them or what their aspirations are. So this is really breaking a barrier of other type where some type of a process or some type of approval was required. Today, you can just stream any learning onto you anytime, even while you're commuting, or you got a half an hour during weekend, you could do that too. We are seeing a lot of people learning late in the evenings, while they're commuting, while they're traveling, and on the weekends, which never used to happen earlier.
And if I can say, because I've been fortunate to see what Tata Communications has been doing since 2016, and the program they run, it's phenomenal, right? To your earlier question, what makes for a best practice program? If Aadesh and Lax will allow it, we should get people to come and take a peek of what both these companies are running, because it's really, really phenomenal programs.
Share some of the details. What makes these programs so unique? If gentlemen, you'd
No,
like
just to add on, I mean, very, very exciting. Of course, a humongous amount of work done in that space in L&T. L&T is also sometimes known as learning and training company.
It's very fortunate for the workforce.
And we called it democratization of learning. And that was possible due to technology, right? And so everybody has access to at least one learning platform. And more than anything else, like Aadesh said, everybody is, going through a short learning program when they are when they are in the back seat of the car or when they're commuting. But I think, the key is that, YouTube has become the biggest learning university. And I go to YouTube for anything. I just Google. I have to come and speak here today. I have to just go there. And companies have to catch up. Companies have to provide similar platforms in the domain where we are working, right? In the technology domain where we are working, those courses have to be made available. And today, the world is available in India, right? On a click of a button.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Aadesh, as Raghav has just so rightly pointed out, the wonderful programs you're running. Can you share some details of some of the programs?
What we call this as learning on demand, right? And skill has actually now become a currency, right? Potential was earlier defined as your innate competencies, which can then be shaped for higher output. Today, I would say potential means your ability to learn and unlearn very quickly, right? So how do you make skill as a currency? So, for example, Tata Communications Learning Academy is an on-demand learning platform, and we have built this into a multi-channel platform. So we have multiple MOOC platforms. For example, Coursera has been a partner for several years. The entire Coursera content is available to all our employees globally, right? And for example, we have been doing about 8,000 certifications for 14,000 employees every year, right? Imagine that. And 7.5 days of learning per employee per year. So once you give power in the hands of the user, right, create a consumer grade experience, then people start using it like you would never use before. And the freemium content is become very powerful. So 2/3 of our training volumes, right? Last year we did 120,000 training days. 2/3 of those are coming from freemium content, right? And that's really high quality, good content.
I mean, if I can quickly add, sorry, come in. We like learning on demand. We call it anytime learning. And I'm very proud or very happy to say that, at CXO level, people can go to our anytime learning platform and enroll for a course to complete their executive MBA or even complete their PhD programs. And 2 of them have done that, right?
So do you see a big difference in, as you just mentioned, the CXO level of training versus maybe a -1 level and then the new joinees? Is there a big difference in how the workforce approaches skilling and upskilling?
I think that bit-sized learning that Aadesh referred to, that's what younger people look for, right? Short bursts, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 20 minutes videos. And maybe the people of my generation look for, certificates and look for MBA programs and PhD programs. But learning, I mean, you don't have a choice in this world. You have to learn, otherwise you become unemployable.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. Across the board, regardless which level you're at, it's the order of the
If
day.
I can also add very quickly, right? You might take a topic. The application of that topic in terms of how you want to learn it depends on your role and depends on your seniority level, right? So if you take Gen AI, right? CEO or a CHRO may say, look, I want to think about Gen AI as a high level strategic input, and I'm happy to take a 2-3 hour course on it. While a software developer might say, look, it's going to take me 100 hours to figure out how I'm going to apply Gen AI in my day-to-day development. And so I'm going to be a practitioner and I'm going to go deep as well. So in the broader context of, look, it is probably online, it is at your own pace, it is on demand, it comes with a certification. But is the learning serving the purpose which helps you succeed in your job is critical for that learning to be relevant as well.
Absolutely. That's such a. How, gentlemen, would you address that in your organization? Sort of assessing the effectiveness of all these programs that you present to the workforce?
See, I think there are 3 or 4 ways in which we do that. Right? I think the first is there is a certain need for learning that employees have. Right? If you look at the top 5 things that employees expect, this will be one of them. Now, so we benchmark ourselves vis-a-vis the best companies in the world. So if you look at the best employers who are global, the employee satisfaction with learning, the average score is 85. And for the last few years, we have hovered between 86, 87, and 88, right? So the employee feedback comes out very strong. I think the second feedback is that at an enterprise level, at a board level, we have a risk committee, enterprise risk committee, right? And the risk committee looks at what are the top 10 risks and how the management is managing it. So, about 6, 7 years ago, skill was one of the top 10 risks. But as we developed what I have described and what Raghav mentioned, within 3 years, we were able to remove that risk from top 10 because it's not that we have all the skills that we need, but now we have set up a way to develop anything that is required, right? So that's the second way. And I think the third is skills must lead to a change of role, right? Which means there are new roles continuously coming up which leverage those skills. So how are the people who are learning those really moving to those roles? So those are the 3 ways we mentioned, and we are really seeing a very high impact.
Yeah, wonderful. Lax, same for
I
you.
mean, to me, if I can respond at 2 levels, right? At one level, for the entire company, the metric is really how many people are accessing the technology platform and learning. It's not about whether they learnt, right? It's about their willingness to go and learn, right? So that's at one level. On the other level, of course, we have very strong talent management, talent development, leadership development programs. So there are a bunch of top talent who are going through very structured learning programs. So for those people, they are being groomed to take on a particular role, or they have been groomed to take on something specific in the organization. So there is a measurement, and the measurement happens not only by the immediate supervisor who's looking at how good the guy is on the job, but it's also the appropriate coaches or mentors who are also playing an active role, telling us, yes, he's developed and you can now go on and give him the next higher role. So that's the second level of evaluation of how well the talent is learning.
Assess. Okay, wonderful. So, Raghav, if you can just help pull it all together now as we come to a close of this conversation, how would you say is sort of a key takeaway that you could share when it comes to ensuring the impactfulness of skilling, upskilling, and learning and development programs?
Yeah, I think we are probably amongst all 3, 4 of us saying 3 things. Firstly, increasingly for companies and for working professionals, learning and skill development is mission critical. It's not learning for the sake of learning, but learning for building skills for being successful in specific roles. So skills first learning is, and as we've heard, it's a top CHRO agenda. I would say maybe in the top 3, that's one. Second, technology, data science, and now increasingly generative AI, I think are domains where one needs to really double down on as companies. And we heard from Aadesh about the productivity gains which are coming about as a part of this. So I think we thought after COVID that, look, technology had stopped disrupting us, but it continues to surprise. That's a clear message. And third, I think the amount of innovation that has come in learning in terms of how you can learn, I think is the third element. Now, whether that's bite-sized learning, whether that's certifications from top institutions, whether that is generative AI features within the learning experience, which make the learning experience a lot richer. And we've launched something called Coach and Course Builder and so on. But the learning experience itself is very, very important. And all of this eventually needs to result in outcomes, business outcomes, people outcomes, and so on. And that's the whole purpose that I think we're all after in terms of trying to serve.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, gentlemen. A key takeaway to
Yeah,
ensure
so
impactfulness.
so let me add one point to what Raghav was saying. Right, going back to school chemistry, the half life of carbon. Right, so in X number of years, the amount of carbon in matter becomes half. Right, so I think that applies to skills today. So if you look at our previous generation, the skill would have half life of about 15-20 years. And today's become 5 years. What this means is that in 5 years, what you know, half of it is going to become obsolete. So how do you keep replacing that with something that is going to be futuristic is really key as an individual and key as a company for it to provide opportunities to people to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Lax?
So I was reading the McKinsey technology trend for 23, and they've said that one of the major hurdle for growth is availability of talent or availability of skilled talent. And therefore, I think it's not only an imperative for all of us to learn to remain employable, but it's also for the growth, right? Not only growth of the company, but growth of the country and maybe growth of this world, right? So learning is the imperative.
Absolutely.
Wow, gentlemen, on that note, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to learn from you really what it means to have the future of the workplace, skilling, learning, and development. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been great pleasure meeting you and talking to Lax and Raghav.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful to be on this panel, Devina. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.